Hi, Blogging Heads viewers. It's Daniel Strauss of Woodruff and Strauss on our new monthly now podcast because it's the election and Betsy and I get too exhausted. And I am here today, again, after much begging, with Kevin Roose of Fusion. Were you at New York Mag last time we talked?
I might have been.
Okay. Or you just started. And one of the reasons I wanted to bring Kevin on here is because I had noticed, I thought Kevin was one of these writers that I follow that refuses to write about politics, along with Mina Kimes, who we've had on here. But you started to write a lot about politics and write about Donald Trump, man.
Well, it turns out there's an election happening, and so no one really cares about Google's latest Android updates when the free world hangs in the balance. It turns out. So
I guess although.
And I should preface this by saying, like, I am a terrible political writer. So my writing about politics should be taken with, like, baskets full of salt.
I don't think you've combed the depths of political reporters, man. I think there are some, don't sell yourself short, there are far worse political writers out there. I promise
That's
you.
not exactly an endorsement. I mean, the bar...
No. Yeah, the bar is much lower than you think, though. But no, I think that's unfair to say also, because this morning I woke up and I had to deal with the iTunes bug. Do you know what I'm talking about? There's this apparently iTunes bug that's going around that hides some of your music. And I thought I lost like all those Creed albums I'd been listening to for years. It's not really, but like all my pirated music. Luckily there was a fix and there was an article online about it. You know.
Well, thank God the tech journalists of the world are not falling down during this election year. I'm glad someone is waving the banner.
So how are you feeling about Trump today? What's your read on it?
Well, it's funny. I just finished editing a post. A couple of our reporters went back and dug up 107 of his classic quotes. And on one level, it's terrifying. This guy could have the nuclear codes. Just the cadence is one that we're all familiar with of Trump's speech patterns,
right? But
what you don't really understand until you read all of these quotes in context is I honestly don't think he knows how to construct a coherent answer to a question. I mean, it's like most politicians, you get a question and they take that question and build a logical segue into the thing that they actually want to talk about,
right?
But with Trump, it's just random assignation of topics. It's you ask him about football and he's talking about, the separation of church and state. It's almost like a random number generator thing that's happening. So that was a little scary, but the guy is very quotable. I think, Trump is the only candidate who understands America's particular relationship with celebrity and how that has sort of morphed and been amplified by social media.
Yeah.
And I've been saying this for a long time. If, bloggers, I think, and people who look at, internet traffic all day, like I do, I think had a jump on predicting the rise of Trump because we could see very early on that, Trump was unbelievable for page engagement. I mean, everything that you post with Trump's name in the headline explodes. And he's very good at cultivating that day after day.
Right.
I've called him the chart beat candidate because he's to me, it's he is an embodiment of a certain mentality that says that, whether it's positive engagement or negative engagement doesn't matter. It's just engagement, just move the needle, just spike the attention by any means necessary.
Right.
And I think Trump understands that.
It's funny you mentioned that because when I was at TPM, they had traffic metrics there, and you learned over time the way to get your traffic metrics is you figure out your mini beats that will boost your numbers. So mine were the trick was with me, it was Elizabeth Warren and anything Elizabeth Warren smashes or something. You turn her into the Hulk, and that whatever the story is, it would jump. And it would be the same with Sam Brownback, and it was the same with Donald Trump. And I think that was not unique to the TPM readers. That's why Trump could. I think he was the only person who could call into Fox and Friends in the morning for a while. But the funny thing is that like you would hear a lot of journalists in DC at the very beginning of the cycle being like, no, he's not going to run. I know this, like the traffic is great, but like, you know, and over time you could see the change in tone. My first headline story back at my first lead story back here at Politico when I came back was on Trump. And the first quote in there, like the third graph, is a pollster saying like, everyone needs to calm down and chill. So, and here we are. He's a presumptive.
Well, and I think if you look at like blog traffic going back through the start of the primary season, I mean, bloggers and media people were some of the first to realize that like this Ben Carson thing could really have legs, because he too was like having unbelievable engagement on Facebook from a very early point. And I wonder, I haven't actually done this, but I wonder if you stacked like his Facebook engagement or engagement on stories about him against his poll numbers. Like I actually might sort of be a leading indicator of like Facebook might capture data about someone's interest levels a couple of weeks before polling data does.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't be surprised if
I think that's totally true. And like the remarkable thing about, in the same way that Sarah Palin used her Facebook to circumvent the media, Donald Trump has used his Twitter account. I mean, like if he's the ultimate editor, right? Like he tweets something, a million like stories will be written about that tweet, depending on what it is. I guess it is, you know, this is making me feel good, Kevin. This is making me feel like bloggers are still like ahead of the game. As someone who like grew up in that reporting world or started out there. So I plan on like sharing this in full once this election is over, the time that Donald Trump called me to complain about a story. But I wanted to ask you sort of like beyond sort of like there is something, like you said, there's something mesmerizing about how he talks, and it is very engaging and it's very simple. You can see that where you had Jeb Bush and Scott Walker and all these candidates, most of America didn't really know. And there was this entertaining guy just saying really positive things. You can kind of understand like why he rose, right?
Totally.
And
by the way, you should tell that Trump story now. You shouldn't wait till after the election. America needs to know. Does
America need to know? I don't think I can't yet because I need to get my editors to sign off on it before I do that. But I promise.
Mainstream media, man, always bowing to the pressures of the candidates.
After the episode, I will share the audio with you, Kevin, because it's like honestly my proudest achievement. And the plan was at the end of this cycle, Betsy and I would have sort of a last episode, and that was going to be in there. It was like an all-season confessional.
Can't wait.
But beyond that, you've been writing not just on like the rise of Trump and like how he's sort of like in command of these vast supporters that otherwise don't seem very engaged in politics. But you've also been writing about sort of the policy implications of that, or sort of like people seem to see what they want to see in Trump. Is a theme I've gotten over time. Is that fair? Am I reading this wrong here?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know that I've written about this. I've certainly edited stories about that, but I think that one thing that was really prescient, and that I think this was sort of first articulated in a wonderful GQ profile of Trump, maybe middle of last year, where it said, the voter has seen politician after politician come into their state and put on a plaid shirt and like go bowling and pretend to, drink the local beer and like pretend to be a working class hero. And like Trump doesn't do any of that.
Nope.
He's not going to be in any fucking plaid shirts, and he's not going to be bowling, and he's not going to be pretending that he likes your crappy beer. Like he's coming in on his private jet, and he is coming in with his, model wife, and he is going to tell you how to be a winner. And like that is a compelling message. And I feel like the sort of what was lost in all of the, sort of Sanders rise and before that the Occupy movement is that America doesn't hate the rich. I mean, America has had like a long history of idolizing and ascribing
Right.
morality to the rich.
Right. Horatio Algiers, right? You just go back. This is the land where you can be rich just because you're deserving, right? And anyone can be rich.
Totally. Totally, and that's the aspiration. And so when Trump, refuses to play the pander game and just, flies into these states in the Midwest and says like, I'm a winner and I'm going to make you a winner too. Like that's something that people haven't heard a lot, and I feel like it's pretty fresh.
So you're from Ohio, right?
I am.
I'm from Illinois. I went to Michigan, so I'm supposed to like hate you, I guess. I don't know. I get a lot of shit around here for going to the University of Michigan. Jack Schaefer gives that to me a lot. So yeah, but I think you hit on like a big thing that people find. This is like, to I think a lot of people, Trump is what they would do if they were rich. Like, you're not super healthy. Be so rich that you can get a doctor to sign off and say like you're going to be the healthiest president of all time if elected, which is what happened. And then the hospital that doctor worked at said the next day that his opinions didn't reflect the views of the hospital. But that was,
right.
But I think that's the honest thing. And what blows, what we're seeing now, I think in DC is we're seeing where for a long time, and it was very remarkable that establishment Republicans were rallying around Ted Cruz, who pissed them off for a while. They're all swallowing their pride and rallying around Trump. And it's not just in sort of like vague statements now, but it's joint fundraising agreements, which is sort of like the backbone of a campaign where the Republican National Committee, which is basically in charge of helping whoever the nominee is going to work closely with Donald Trump now. And state parties are going to do that. And, so we're seeing it is no longer like a question, will a lot of the parties stay out of the election? They're doing it. They are together at this point. It's remarkable. And what's remarkable about it also is that on the other side, we have a candidate who everyone thought would glide through the primary and just coast to the election. And she's not done. And right now, I'm writing a lot about how Bernie Sanders is just staying there in one way or another. So let me ask you one thing though. I mean, one thing I'm surprised about with Trump and his followers is essentially like, should I be surprised that so many of these, like he has this huge internet presence and huge internet following, but these are not voters. And I feel like the view in DC a lot of the time is that these voters who are out of the mainstream just are not connected to the internet or something. Is this like a weird, it just doesn't come to my mind. And I kind of feel like that's why journalists at the beginning of the cycle sort of discounted them a lot, ironically, because we spend most of our time online.
Well, have you watched cable news recently? Like cable news is a time delayed internet at this point. Like basically Twitter is the assignment desk for cable news.
God, that's depressing.
And what happens, literally, like I basically only watch cable news these days when I'm like stuck in an airport. And whenever I watch it, I'm struck by just literally how much of it is like rote recitation of what happened on Twitter like 4 to 6 hours earlier.
Right.
And like, so it doesn't matter that these people aren't on Twitter or on the internet, that they're not early adopters. Like they're seeing it in some form and it's leaking out. And I think that like, that's a fallacy that like people are either consumers of the internet or not. And when in reality, like TV is drawing a lot of its cues and a lot of its narratives from what is sort of like floated as a trial balloon on the internet. And
there's a lot of incentive because like this is a guy that commands a huge amount of traffic, and in this ecosystem where all these publications are like demanding traffic, throw him up there. He says crazy shit. If you look at the metrics for that versus like say Jeb Bush, there's a horrid incentive to like boost the guy that commands a lot of traffic versus Jeb Bush, who's very low energy.
Sure. I don't know that it's, you hear this a lot, right? People blaming the media for over covering Trump. And I don't really buy that. The thing I will say is that Trump has is probably the only candidate in who seems to understand that the internet works on a power law model. So, the most popular post on any given site on most weeks or most months is not twice as popular as the second most popular post. It's 10 times more popular. So when things break through to become very popular, they tend to become much more popular than sort of incrementally. The distribution curve is not sort of a flat, sort of like X equals Y. It's like it follows the power law. And I feel like he understood that, to be the thing that people are talking about in a given day gets much more attention and much more sort of notoriety than being the second most interesting story of the day.
Yeah.
And so he has an uncanny knack at, when there's a lull in the news cycle, just like saying something that's going to burst through and become instantly that most interesting thing. And I don't think that's accidental. Like, I think he reads media cycles very well. And like, people were starting to talk about other things this week, and so he dropped a Vince Foster reference. It's just like,
right.
you see this over and over again, where like, if you haven't heard from Trump in like 48 hours or so, you start to feel like he's like cooking the next big thing, and then it usually comes out.
Jesus, you're right. It's true. He's treating this as sort of like a media competition, I guess, or something, and it's working.
I mean, he would be an amazing editor. I've always said this, like Donald Trump would be an amazing blog editor.
You want Donald Trump to be a blog editor?
He'd be very, very good at it. I will say that.
He would say that too, actually.
Yeah, no, I believe it. I wouldn't want him to be my editor, but I think, I would not put it past him to be very good at assigning things that break through the all the sort of clutter out there.
It is, by the way, man, it is totally okay for you to disagree with me or something. If you don't like, call me out, fisticuffs. I don't know.
I don't disagree with you on anything.
As everyone else should too. So let's talk about this other thing. You left writing and typing, putting words on the internet, and you moved to running your own show on Fusion. And it was sort of 10-minute episodes, and it took me a little while, but I finally tuned into this one episode you did where you went to a hackers convention, and God, this sounds like shattered glass. I'm sorry, man. And you sort of saw all the ways that you could be hacked, and some of them are very, very low key. So if like you had this woman hacker pretending she was your wife and just accidentally was not on an account and gave a bogus social security number, and she was in. And that's still sort of haunting to me to this day. What was your experience? What was that like, switching from writing to producing a show? Because you don't usually see that. Most journalists who want to break that barrier, want to have their face in front of the camera.
Well, I also had my face in front of the camera.
Yeah, okay.
So I am, fear not, my narcissistic streak is still alive and well. No, this was a chance for me to do something entirely new. I still put words on the internet. I'm putting some on the internet today, in fact, but I wanted to try a TV show as just a challenge to see whether I could do it, whether the thing that we produced would be any good. I think it worked. I think it's a great show. It's 16 mini episodes. Everything from body hacking to virtual reality to revenge porn to drone racing, like all of these sort of like snippets of futuristic life. And this one, the hacking one, was probably the one that was the most sort of like immersive, in the sense that I actually volunteered to have two of the world's best hackers just destroy me. Like, I wanted to just, like, if they were, determined to do as much damage to me as possible, like, how far could they go? What could they do? How screwed would I be?
Right.
And the answer is, of course, very screwed. It was brutal. It was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. And I want to join the Amish is the upshot of this. I want to throw away all my technology.
Right. The only comfort we're all supposed to take away from this is that why you? You're not a special snowflake. Most hackers don't really care about you.
Right. I mean, this was in some ways like the silver lining to this was at the end of it. I asked the hacker like, well, am I really in danger of this? And he says, probably not. Most of us have what's called privacy through obscurity. So this was his way of telling me that like no one gives a shit, and probably I don't have enough money to be worth hacking, and I'm not important enough for someone to want to take down. So that's rest assured. This was only partially comforting.
Well, I feel like for a journalist, yeah, I mean, and last time you were on, we talked about like pissing off wealthy Wall Streeters. And for me, I feel like I pissed off a fair amount of people in my time. I think our kind are due for some monumental hacking thing. And that was it. But Kevin, it's not only that though. You've also switched to editing, which is something I'm sort of fascinated by, partially because I'm not going to be an editor, at least anytime soon. And we had previously Sarah Mims of Vice. She runs the politics team at Vice News on here, and she talked about that. What's your experience with like moving over to editing, which I'm really fascinated by, because my friends who've sort of done that have talked about how rewarding it is in a surprising way.
Yeah, I really like it. I mean, I run a team of about 12 or 13 sort of reporters, and I work across Fusion sort of as news director to like coordinate a lot of our news efforts, and it's really fun. I mean, I think it's some days I miss putting words on the page, as you said, but I also think it like in some ways being an editor gives you more arms. Like it just adds appendages with which you are able to do things. And so, these reporters are great. A lot of them are young and talented and going places. And so I get to just like take credit for their success. And it's wonderful. I mean, I really enjoy sitting down with a piece of writing and making it better and trying to figure out the right way to sort of play the video game that is digital media, and like which button combos to push and when to throw your right hook or when to throw your left jab. It's fun. It's like it feels very much like the kind of thing that I like to do, and I think it also is something that's relatively rare in digital media these days. I mean, there are a lot of young writers who grow up writing on the internet with basically no editing, and I think that's something that I want to avoid, and that's one of the reasons that I like editing, is because I'm actually able to like give attention to these people so that they're getting better. And I think it's borderline abusive
teaching, right?
to throw someone out there on the internet with no editing and just say like fend for yourself.
Some people do that. Some people there are some news outlets that sort of hire aggressively to do that, and have tried in the past. I think most of the internet and big publications have learned experience pays off. Some of it is teaching, though, right? It's sort of like mentoring reporters and that sort of bond. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have a terrific set of editors around me who do a lot of that too, and I think my role is just to like give them sort of like steer and sort of herd and push, but not like micromanage. I'm not an editor who goes in and sometimes I rewrite entire paragraphs, but that's pretty rare. Usually it's just it's making sure that things are emphasized in the right order, that things are presented in a way that the audience will understand,
right, that
the ideas themselves are stand a chance of breaking out. So that's fun, and I think it would be depressing if I were at a place that only cared about maximizing traffic and, doing sort of the lowest common denominator stories. But luckily Fusion is a place where we can aim a little bit higher than that. And so there's been a lot of rewarding stuff that we've put out.
Absolutely. My first editor ever, actually, Rob Weil, who was my editor at my high school paper, is one of your guys. Kick his ass
Nice.
For me. Not really. I love Rob. But he hammered me into writing complete sentences, which was a painful process that Rob and I both remember vividly.
Sometimes important.
Sometimes, not all the time. Not so important with Trump. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for our two-part series over, I think 2 years of this. It was good to have you.
See you again in 2018.
Yeah, and we'll close out now, and I'll give you a little sneak preview of this other thing. So,
All right.
all right.
Thanks, man.
Thanks,
Good
Kevin.
to talk to you.
Bye.
All right, bye.